Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and in tonight's 8.1 PTR build, Blizzard has released the newest Azerite armor from the Battle for Dazal'alor and other sources that you obtain it from in 8.1. Now, I did want to take a brief look at the classes that have 3 specific specs and their specific Azerite pieces, as well as Druids that have 4 specs and Demon Hunters that have 2. So taking a look here, first of all, I'm on my Warlock. As we can see here, this is the Divine Fury Raiment from the new Battle for Dazal'alor raid. Looking at it here, we can see the very first row here, which is the new row that they've been talking about for a few weeks now, has 6 available traits in it. And you can see here that both Baleful Invocation and Chaos Shards are the new traits here. You can also see that one requires Destruction and one requires Demonology. So basically what you've got here is, a Demonology trait, Destruction, Affliction, and Affliction. So this gives you basically 2 traits you can choose from in the first ring for each spec, which makes getting specific traits much easier than it was in previous, tiers, or the previous tier of this expansion. If you eliminate this first ring, though, you can see here on the second, third, and fourth ring here, this is basically the current ring we have now. You have 1 for Affliction, 1 for Destruction, a terrible trait for Demonology, and a passive trait here, or a generic trait here. One thing that's interesting, like I said, there probably is going to be certain pieces of gear that will have better combinations on them than others. So for like Demonology, you might want this for like single target builds, Shadow's Bite, and having like Demonic Tyrant on the second row here, or something of the sort. There's going to be certain pieces that are better for certain specs in certain scenarios. There's maybe like a combination of Racking Brilliance here and having something like Inevitable Demise or something in the second row. But what this really is going to do, it's going to change Azerite gear a lot moving forward. It's going to make a lot of pieces, certain traits, much easier to actually obtain and use, and it's really going to come down to just item level at this point. There's going to be a lot of pieces that you can have that can cover basically any trait you want, and you're not going to see, people running 340 pieces that say, hey, because, I want Racking Brilliance on this fight as a Warlock, and I have a 370 piece, but it has some terrible trait on it. But hey, this 340 piece still sims higher because I have Racking Brilliance on it. You're not really going to see that anymore, which is a great situation to be in moving forward into Battle for Azeroth. Now, switching things up a little bit here, this is another chest from Battle for Dazal'alor. This is actually Vestments of the Afterlife from King Rastakhan. As you can see, like I mentioned here, traits have changed spots in the first and second row here. We can see we actually have Sudden Onset here for Affliction, Demonic Meteor for Demonology, Rolling Havoc for Destruction, Crashing Chaos for Destruction, your other Demonology trait, and Supreme Commander, and finally we have Pandemic Invocation here for Affliction. So like I mentioned a little bit, probably a minute or so ago, there are going to be certain pieces that are going to be more sought after than others, which can lead to a bit of frustration, or it's probably going to lead to a bit of frustration at times. But once again, having just so many traits available to you, it should remove a good bit of the, hey, I'm wearing a 340 versus 385 piece because this trait is better. I do want to mention as well, it is consistent across every single spec and class that I've seen so far. The first row is going to require Heart of Azeroth level 23. The second row requires 27. The third requires 31. The fourth is 35. And the final row that grants you 5 additional item levels is level 39. So there's not going to be a whole lot of Azerite we have to grind here, at least I feel in a sense. I think I'm 28 or 29 already on the live servers. And with Battle for Dazal'alor not releasing until January, I believe it said January 11th. I believe right around there at BlizzCon. I was there 2 days ago. I can't really remember. But regardless, I would imagine we're probably going to be pretty close to reaching like this 35 or 39 level, honestly, just whenever Battle for Dazal'alor actually releases. So that's a good thing to actually see moving into, 8.1 into Battle for Dazal'alor. There's probably not going to be a whole lot of an Azerite grind if they keep these Heart of Azeroth levels here. I wouldn't be surprised if they increased a bit because, like I said, a decent bit of players will probably already be at 39 or so at that point. Alright, now taking a look at my Demon Hunter here, first of all, I want to get out of the way that I know I only have 1 Warglaive on. I know he looks stupid. This character literally logs on to run Black Temple once a week to complete the set, hopefully before Burning Crusade. Time Walking comes back around again and logs back out. So I know that. Moving forward, he is 110, which is the reason this is not illuminated. With that being said, looking in the first row here, as I mentioned, because we only actually have 2 specs on a Demon Hunter, Havoc and Vengeance, we only have 4 traits here. One being Revolving Blades, the other being Revel in Pain, Essence Sever, and we finally have Eyes of Rage. Looking in the second row here, which is currently the first row on live servers right now, our choices here are Chaotic Transformation, Rigid Carapace, and Treacherous Covenant, which is just another trait that's going to be on 8.1. As I mentioned here, obviously these traits will change up from different pieces. As you can see right here, I'm wearing a helm. It's Cowl of Righteous Resolve from Battle for Dazal'alor. But just looking at it here, once again, it just gives you so many more choices for actual traits heading into 8.1 that you're not going to be you're not going to be wearing just, okay, I want one specific helm 100% of the time. Like if there's one trait you want that's so far ahead of the other ones, like was the case for Windwalker Monks for a while, which basically removed Fist of Fury from their rotation, or even Sudden Onset for Affliction Warlocks or things of the sort. You're not going to be stuck with running one or two helms, or one or two pieces of Azerite gear, I should say, specifically. You're going to have a lot more options having this first row and second row combined. Now, taking a look at my worst actual character here, I have my balanced Druid. Like I said before a little bit ago, Druids do have 8 actual choices in their first row, and they have 5 actual choices in the second row. Taking a look here, I'm going to read these as I go, because I haven't actually played my Druid in about a year and a half. We have Shrieking Stars, Blood Mist, Layered Mane, Early Harvest, Lively Spirit, Guardian's Wrath, Wild Flesh Rending, that's an interesting one, okay, and Lunar Shrapnel. I am looking at the Grongpelt Vest here, which is the chest from Battle for Dazal'alor. As I mentioned, there are 8 traits in the first row. Once again, 2 for Balance, 2 for Guardian, 2 for Feral, and 2 for Restoration. Looking at the second row here, like I mentioned, there are 5 traits here. 1 for each spec specifically, and 1 generic trait. So, you know, this reminds me a lot, even for every single class, of the Netherlight Crucible. You're going to want to find the piece that has your best main trait in the first row here, and there's obviously going to be, you know, a few options from the raid and probably other sources as well. And then basically find your second best option in the second row here, seeing as we have, you know, 1 for each spec. So, as I mentioned, you're going to have a lot of customization, but there still is probably going to, well, there pretty much is going to be pretty much an optimal piece heading forward into, you know, into Battle for Dazal'alor and then into just Mythic Plus content or whatever you're doing in 8.1. With that being said, like I mentioned, it does give you a lot more options here though. And there is one final thing that I actually wanted to mention here. I did notice when going through all of the chests and helms and shoulders here that the levels, like I mentioned, do change a bit, just like they did in Uldir or required Azerite levels. As we can see here, I'll just go through each and every one here, and it seems to be the same across all specs and all classes. This is a chest, the Grongpelt Vest. It requires 23 for the first row, 27 for the second row, 31 for the third, 35, jeez, it's getting late, for the fourth row, and 39 for the final one that gives you 5 bonus item levels. That's a chest piece. Taking a look at the actual, let's look here. Let's look at a helm here. This is the Cowl of Righteous Resolve. We have 22 for the first row, 26 for the second row, 30 for the third row, 34 for the fourth row, and 38 for the final row that gives you the final 5 Azerite traits. And taking a look at a pair of shoulders here, that's not it, that's the store, I don't want to go there. The first row we have one that requires level 24, second row is 28, third is 32, the fourth is 36, and the final row is 40 here. So shoulders seem to be the one that requires the highest Azerite rank for between shoulders, chest, and helm in Battle for Dazal'alor. Once again, as I mentioned a few times though, I really don't think Azerite level 40 is going to be too hard to reach in or before 8.1. So I wouldn't be surprised to all see these buffed and increased a little bit before 8.1 and Battle for Dazal'alor actually goes live. Now, as I mentioned a little bit ago, I am a pretty big fan of this system moving forward. I do think that it gives you a whole lot more options trait-wise, and it's probably going to eliminate a good bit of the, hey, I'm wearing a 340 piece versus a 370 because this 340 is so much stronger than my other piece. With that being said, though, I am a bit concerned, like I mentioned a little bit ago, talking about my Boomkin, that it's sort of similar in a sense to the way the Netherlight Crucible worked out, that you really wanted, you know, one of your 2 best traits for whatever scenario in the first row, and your second best one in the second row. And I'm not sure how Azerite's going to work out of, you know, dungeons or other sources, you know, emissary caches and things with the new row worked in 8.1. But you know, take, for example, like for an Affliction Warlock, you know, you were probably going to want to have, I mean, it would be nice to have, like, you know, a combination of like Sudden Onset and Inevitable Demise in your first row and second row, over, you know, the combination you'd rather run on a single target based encounter. I guess ID isn't the best, you know, example because of its change in 8.1, but for across every class and every spec, you know, for Mythic Plus, you might want these 2 traits, like, you know, that are really strong in Mythic Plus and, you know, trash encounters, you know, pulling 2 or 3 packs at once, and are also putting out a lot of damage. You know, saying like a tank, you want a really defensive trait for certain things, but also want, you know, a trait that puts out a lot of damage, you know, and it just, and there's going to be other combinations you want for raid encounters, like a single target based raid encounter, where, so it makes me a little nervous, I guess you could say, because it might just promote this gameplay once again. We're like, well, okay, you know, I still only want one or two specific pieces, or, you know, I want this piece specifically for Mythic Plus, and I want this piece specifically for rating, I want this combination with this and that combination with that. I think making all the traits, or the majority of the traits, available to us as players is great, but I'm just worried adding in, you know, effectively, you know, the second row, which is currently the first row, but having the second row of one specific trait for each spec is still going to make things sort of complicated. Just, you know, people are going to want one or two specific items and just discard the others, because, you know, me personally, I love optimizing, min-maxing, everything else. And while having, you know, okay, sure, let's say I want sudden onset from Mythic Plus, or I want one specific trait from Mythic Plus, and it's in my first row, that's awesome. But then there's some garbage trait in the second row, and, you know, some garbage generic passive trait as well. You know, getting that piece is great, but I'd rather have a piece that has my best trait in the first row and my second best trait in the second row, which is probably limited to one or two specific encounters where it drops. So that's really the one thing that I have in mind moving forward. It's going to be interesting to see how Blizzard addresses that, and just the item level disparity, if it does become a thing, still, you know, running a certain piece that has that good combination of your best trait and your second best trait at 350 versus having you know, a 3, or at 355 versus having like a 385 or whatever piece that has a good trait and then a mediocre trait. I do really hope this video helped you guys out seeing the new 8.1 traits in Battle for Dazal'alor. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get back to you guys. If you want to help support the channel, feel free to hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons, as your support really helps. Thanks a lot, guys, and I'll see y'all in 8.1. Peace.